Hey guys, welcome to my channel. As you see in the thumbnail, what if Issei Reborn by Ddraig Part 4. Before we start, please do support for more awesome content and do like, share, comment and also watch previous episodes. Let's start the video. Vissa was then lifted up by, you guessed it, Kaneko herself. Fly was the only word she said as she threw Vissa at a nearby wall. Issei was slightly impressed. For such a little girl, she sure had a lot of power. And finally, there is my queen, Akeno, Rias said. My president, is it my turn to have fun already? I'm going to enjoy this, Akeno said with a sadistic smile. As my queen, Akeno has all the traits of a rook, pawn, knight and bishop, Rias started to explain. When Akeno raised her hand, after she did, lightning immediately struck Vissa. The only thing that Vissa could do now was scream, as her flesh slowly started to burn. Oh my, you're still alive, that's good, I can enjoy this even more, Akeno said with a giggle. Akeno continued to strike Vissa with lightning, each bolt stronger than the other. Akeno specializes in magic mostly. Another interesting fact about her is that she is the ultimate sadist, Rias said. Issei looked at Rias and then at Akeno. How was her being a sadist an interesting fact? Don't worry Issei, she may be like this when fighting, but she is actually very kind to her friends, Rias said with a smile. Foo, it seems like you are still so full of energy. Can you still take a bit more? Just don't die, the president will have the honor of killing you, Akeno said with a smile, more specifically, a creepy, sadistic smile. All right Akeno, that is enough, Rias said with a smile still on her face. Akeno stopped her attacks and came back to Rias. She had a disappointed look on her face. Good job, everyone, I am proud of all of you, Rias said to her peerage, in which they all smiled. Suddenly, their eyes widened. Rias looked at them in confusion. She turned around and saw that Vissa had one last spear thrust left in her, and she was aiming it for Rias. Vissa came closer and closer at Rias with incredible speed. Rias could not move from her shock. Vissa had taken such a beating and she is still able to stand. How was that possible? Before Vissa could strike Rias, a firebolt came from behind Rias and her peerage. The flames engulfed Vissa. She was rolling down on the floor, screaming as she tried to put the fire out. Once she did, she laid down on the floor, not moving, but still alive. Everyone looked to see where the firebolt came from. They saw Issei, arm extended and smoke coming from his hand. Issei, was that you who did that? Rias asked. Issei nodded. Thank you for saving me then, Rias said, grateful that he saved her. The rest also smiled at Issei, grateful that he saved their master. Rias was about to turn around, when she heard a familiar voice. Rias Gremory, since you all had a chance to show us of what you are made of, I would like to show you what my partner can do. It won't be much, since the stray is weak at the moment, but it will be enough to kill her, so I ask, can we deliver the final blow? Ddraig asked. Rias smiled. It's fine by me, Rias said. Draig's voice then went quiet. Everyone was quite curious in what Issei would do. Issei took a few steps forwards. He was now a few feet away from Vissa. He opened his mouth and closed his eyes. He concentrated a lot of his energy at the back of his throat. Smoke started to come out of Issei's mouth. Once he was sure, he released that energy. Flames came out of his mouth, engulfing Vissa full. Her screams didn't last long. Once Issei stopped, there was nothing left of Vissa, except her ashes. Issei turned around and saw that they were all staring at him, mouths open. He then sighed, smoke coming out of his nose and mouth. He then turned around and started to walk away from the group. Issei, where are you going? Rias asked him before he could leave. Issei stopped, but did not turn around. He only boiled his hands into fists and walked outside. It was time to get his friend back from the fallen, and there wasn't going to be any mercy. Issei left the old warehouse and headed towards the church. It was time to save his friend, and mercy was not going to be an option. He, so, you finally begin to accept what you are. Perfect, this is going to be enjoyable, the voice said. Issei only shook his head. No matter how many times that voice told him to accept who he is, he'll always just keep ignoring it. But he also knew that it was something that he couldn't keep up. At some point, he's going to fall. Issei looked slightly up and saw that he had arrived at the church. He stopped walking and looked down at his hands. That dream from last night was still inside his head. Suddenly, an image flashed inside Issei's mind. He saw that he had bloodied hands. He looked down and saw the man with white hair, on the ground dead. He was the same as he was inside his dream, clerical clothing, a deep hole at the top of his head, and his brain was inside his ears and mouth. Issei shook his head. A hand automatically went up to his face. He gritted his teeth and began to breathe heavily. After a few seconds, his hand left his face and his pacey breathing stopped, returning to a more calming one. It was time to get revenge. He looked behind him and gave a small sigh. Of course they would follow him. Oh well, it looks like he'll just have to pretend that they're not there. Are you ready, partner? Ddraig asked out loud. Issei only nodded. He started to walk forwards. He stopped at the front door and put hand on his chin. How should he approach this, silently or loud and stupid? He decided to play it silently, but he doesn't know how long he'll be able to keep it up. He gave 2 knocks on the door and waited. After a minute, the door opened, revealing a man with short black hair and brown eyes. He had a small beard on his face and he had a sleepy expression. What do you want?" the man asked. Issei took the opportunity to look inside the church a bit. It was a normal church and it was the same as any other church, chandeliers on the ceiling, wooden chairs that went all the way to the cross that was in the middle of the church. He couldn't see anything else, since it was too dark. "Look kid, if you want to pray to God, then you should wait until the morning." Sniff sniff. "Wait a second, why do you smell like Devi?" The man was cut off when Issei suddenly grabbed his throat and pulled him towards him. He put his entire arm over his neck and his other hand went to his mouth. The man tried to scream, but his screams were cut out by Issei's hand over his mouth. After a small while, Issei heard a snap and the man went limp in his arms. Issei let his body fall to the ground. Issei then entered the church and closed the door behind him. He walked forwards, but stopped when he heard a loud voice. "Yahoo! Yahoo! Hello shitty devil, have you come here to die by my hand? Please tell me you did," the man said, coming out of a room behind a painting. Issei looked at the man weirdly, but then realized who it was. It was the man with the white hair and the red eyes. I'll take your silence for a yes, but before I cut you down with my sword, I'll let my name haunt you. My name is Fried Salzen." Fried screamed as he dashed at Issei with his sword raised. Issei's eyes widened at the familiar words. "Remember my name is Kokabiel." He heard Kokabiel's voice in his head. Issei gritted his teeth in anger. He looked up and saw Fried's body start to change. His hair changed from white to black, it was also longer, his eyes became redder, his clothing changed as well, though Issei couldn't see most of it. He saw that he had a black robe. That's right, the man that was dashing towards Issei was none other than Kokabiel. "What's wrong, Red Dragon Emperor? Are you shocked to see me, or are you afraid?" The second one sounds more reasonable, since I was the one that created every single scar that's on your face, Kokabiel shouted with a big grin on his face, as he came closer to Issei. Issei clenched both his hands into fists and gritted his teeth hard, almost breaking them. Issei suddenly looked at Kokabiel with fire in his one eye. Once Kokabiel was close enough, Issei punched him with all of his strength, shattering his jaw. Kokabiel fell down, screaming and dropping his sword. He was rolling around, holding his now broken jaw. "You fucking human, how dare you do this to me?" Kokabiel shouted at the top of his lungs. He has never experienced this much pain before. Issei approached him and started to stomp down on the back of his head. Each time Kokabiel tried to crawl away, Issei just pulled him back. After a few powerful stomps, a deep hole was now visible at the top of his head. Issei then turned him around so he was facing him. He mounted on top of him and started to punch his face. One punch, blood, two punches, even more blood. Each punch was coming stronger than the other. "Partner, stop, he's dead, partner, snap out of it." Issei heard Draig's voice. He blinked and then looked down. Kokabiel's body was now replaced by Fried's. Fred was dead, just like in his dream. There was a big hole at the top of his head, but Issei did a little bit more damage. He saw that from all the punches, Fried's face was unrecognizable. His left eye was missing from its socket and a few parts of his face revealed his skull. Was he having a hallucination? He could have sworn that he was fighting Kokabiel. Issei sighed. He stood up and looked around again. He noticed that behind the painting that Fried came from was a staircase. He saw it as he walked closer. He then heard movement coming from the stairs. Issei narrowed his eyes. From his dreams, he remembered that there were a few bodies from exorcists. He took a few steps back and waited. It didn't take long for them to show up. Issei looked at them and counted that there were about 20 or so. One of them dashed forwards at Issei, screaming. Issei saw him and caught his sword with his bare hand, shocking him. Issei managed to tear the sword away from the exorcist. Issei then used that sword to stab him in the stomach. The exorcist fell down on the ground alive, but not for long. Another two charged at Issei. One of them tried to slash Issei across the face, but Issei easily dodged. He then grabbed the arm of the exorcist that tried to attack him. He blocked an incoming sword from another exorcist. He kicked the one that he blocked in the stomach, sending him a few feet away. He then stabbed the one that he was holding in his chest. He quickly ducked another exorcist's sword. He quickly sidestepped to the side and grabbed the top of his head. He turned his head to the right with force, breaking his neck. Suddenly, Issei was grabbed from behind by another exorcist. Another one stood in front of him, ready to strike with his sword. Issei elbowed the exorcist in the liver, making him let go of him. Issei quickly sidestepped away from the exorcist that was holding him, since the other exorcist was about to swing his sword, and he did, on his ally's shoulder. Issei blocked the punches of an exorcist, but then Issei sent a powerful one of his own. Despite the exorcist's attempt to block the punch, it broke his arms. Issei then stomped on his face. Another one dashed at him. Issei easily dodged the attack. He then grabbed the hand that the exorcist was holding the sword. Issei used his power and stabbed the exorcist with his own hand and sword, killing him. Issei was starting to grow impatient, since he didn't have much time, so he decided to end this fight quickly. He extended his hand forwards. Flames came out of his hands, burning a few exorcists. Issei stopped firing his flames and looked at the exorcists that were left alive. They were staring at him with fear in their eyes. Issei started to approach them slowly. They all came back from their frightening thoughts and ran away from Issei. "Stay away from us, you monster," one of them screamed. Unknown by the retreating exorcists, Issei flinched at being called a monster. Naturally, he wouldn't care, but since that dream he saw last night, the word monster became some kind of a cursed word for him. Issei then started to walk towards the door painting. He stopped however when he saw the cross in the middle of the room. He looked at it with hatred. He remembered what Asia told him. She didn't have any friends just because she was the Holy Maiden and just because she healed an injured devil, God exiled her. So he did what he thought was right. He walked towards the cross and placed his hands on it. Smoke started to come out from the wooden cross. When Issei backed up from the cross, Issei now looked at the cross which was slowly beginning to light up in flames. He shook his head and walked towards the painting. He opened the hidden door and walked down the stairs. When he reached the bottom, he saw a wooden door with a small window. Issei kicked the door open, easily breaking its hinges. Issei looked around the room that he was in. It looked like he was in a section in the catacombs of Paris, except that there weren't any skulls around. He looked in front of him and saw that there were 3 fallen angels, looking at him. 2 of them were women and one of them is Ddraig. He then looked up at the wall where his eyes widened. He saw Asia, chained on the wall, but there was something different about her. Her whole body was limp, her eyes were open, but they had no life in it. Issei then realized something. He was too late. He felt like a part of him died as he saw Asia chained to the wall, lifeless. He took a small step forwards. "Che, you're too late kid, we have already extracted her sacred gear, she's already dead," Ddraig said with a smirk. The 2 female fallen angels approached Issei with grins. "What do you say, Kalawana? Shall we get rid of this human scum?" the short girl said. Issei took a small glance at her. He saw that she was wearing a Gothic Lolita attire, which consisted of a black Lolita dress with white frills, a large black bow on the front, and a green jewel embedded on the collar, white thigh-high socks, and black shoes. She also wore a large black bow on top of her hair. She also had blue eyes and twin tails. Issei then took another small glance to the other girl. Her attire consisted of a violet, trench coat-like top with a wide collar, a matching miniskirt, and black-heeled shoes. The trench coat top was open at her chest, giving view to her breasts and cleavage. She also wore a gold necklace around her neck. She also had long, navy blue hair that obscured her right eye and brown eyes. "Yes, let's middle, Master Kokabiel will be pleased," Kalawana said with a smirk, summoning her yellow light spear. Issei lost her at "Kokabiel will be pleased," so, Kokabiel sent them, he'll remember to keep one alive then, or 2. Middle then summoned her pink spear. She threw it at Issei. What made her smirk widen was that Issei didn't make an effort to move. Once the light spear touched Issei, it shattered and disappeared. Middle's eyes widened, though Kalawana and Ddraig grinned at her. "See Middle, you are the weakest link. In terms of power, I am the strongest," Kalawana said proudly, causing Middle and Ddraig to glare at her. "What makes you think that you're the strongest one?" Ddraig said with narrowed eyes. "Simple, in every sparring match that we had, I beat you both. The only one that came close to beating me was Rainier." Speaking of her, what happened to her? "The last time I saw her, was when she was about to take out the human that was supposed to be the host of the Red Dragon Emperor," Kalawana said. "Ah, so you were indeed allies of the fallen Rainier," a voice said. This caused the Middle and Kalawana to look around the room. Ddraig looked at the arm of Issei in curiosity. "What are you talking about, Red Dragon Emperor?" Ddraig asked, shocking the other 2 fallen. "Wait, this kid is the host of the Red Dragon Emperor, and you knew all along?" Kalawana shouted. "Shut up, what did you mean by that, Red Dragon Emperor?" Ddraig asked once more. "You are right, the fallen Rainier approached my host. During their small walk, Rainier revealed herself as a fallen and threw her light spear at my host. Once she realized that my host was not affected by her attacks, she tried to flee, but my partner quickly caught up to her. Let's just say, we enjoyed watching her squirm while my partner choked the life out of her," Ddraig said. You son of a bitch," Kalawana screamed as she dashed at Issei. Issei sighed. This was going to be way too easy. He karate chopped Kalawana on her neck. She fell on the stone floor, unconscious. 1 down, 2 left. Middle widened her eyes and took a few steps back. She felt someone behind her. She turned around and saw Ddraig, looking at her with a smirk. He pushed her at Issei with all his power. Her body collided with Issei's. She looked up and saw him staring at her with a scary look in his eye. Before she could react, Issei kneed her in her solar plexus, cutting her air supply. In a few seconds, she too fell unconscious. "Sigh, well, this is what you get for trusting women to do a man's job. I'll take it from here, and believe me, I won't be as easy as those 2, Ddraig said with a grin on his face. Ddraig took his fighting stance and summoned a blue light spear in his right arm. Issei, seeing this, disappeared. Ddraig's eyes widened as he looked around the room for any sign of Issei. Ddraig then felt a hand on his shoulder. He was spun forcefully around and saw Issei. Issei already summoned his boosted gear in his right hand, and it was with the same hand that he punched Ddraig. Ddraig fell to the ground, holding his right cheek where Issei punched him. Issei picked him up from the ground and threw him towards the wall Asia was chained to. Once Ddraig fell to the ground, he looked up and saw Issei approaching him slowly. He tried to stand up, but Issei grabbed him by the throat. Issei head-butted him, breaking his skull. Issei grabbed his throat once more and threw him at the other side of the room. Ddraig's body stopped rolling at the front of the now broken door that Issei kicked open. He desperately began trying to crawl away, trying to escape Issei's fury. He felt two hands grab both of his legs, pulling him away from the exit. Issei turned him around and shoved both of his thumbs into Donasik's eyes. Donasik screamed as Issei shoved his thumbs deeper and deeper into his skull. Issei then pushed his thumbs deeper. Donasik's body went limp. Issei pulled his thumbs back and looked at them. He saw that both of Donasik's eyeballs were on his thumbs. Issei pulled them off his thumbs and threw them on the ground. Issei looked back and saw Asia's body. It was still the same, lifeless. Issei then looked at Donasik's body and saw a green glow coming from one of his fingers. Once he got closer, it looked like a ring with a green jewel on top. He pulled the ring off Donasik's finger and looked at it closely. Partner, that is Asia's sacred gear, Twilight Healing. I suggest we give it to her. I'm sorry partner, I'm sorry that we didn't make it in time. Ddraig apologized to his host, but Issei stopped listening when Ddraig said that it was her sacred gear. He tore the chains that chained Asia on the wall. He slung her over his shoulder and started to walk to the set of stairs. Wait, partner, what about the two fallen that you left alive? Aren't we going to question them? Ddraig asked. Issei stopped walking and looked back at the two unconscious fallen. He lightly let Asia on the floor and walked over to the two fallen. He slugged both of them over his shoulders while he carried Asia bridal style. He walked up the steps and saw the orc waiting. They didn't seem to notice him. Issei looked at the cross that he burnt, which was now just a piece of burnt wood. Issei, he heard the voice of Rias. He looked at her and saw her running at him. Issei, are you all right? They didn't hurt you, did they? Rias asked. Issei shook his head. He then pushed Asia's dead body towards her. Rias grabbed the dead nun and looked at Issei with confusion. Issei then gave her Twilight Healing, causing Rias to widen her eyes. Issei then walked past her carrying the two fallen still. He went past Akeno, Kaneko and Kiba. Issei, wait, Rias shouted as she turned around, but by that time, Issei was already gone. With Issei unlocked his door and entered his house. He opened the lights. Issei dropped the bodies of the two fallen on his couch. Partner, I know what you're thinking, don't do it, Ddraig pleaded his host, but Issei ignored him. He opened his fridge and grabbed a big bottle of beer. Issei took the lid off and began to drink from the bottle. He, that's right, continue to go deeper and deeper into your depression, you will go even deeper, and as time goes by, they will realize that you are too far gone, the voice said. Issei though, ignored it as well, because he finally understood what those lyrics meant. When real life is hard on you, the only happiness that you have left is inside a bottle. Happiness, straight from the bottle, when real life's too hard to swallow. Calawarna's eyes fluttered open. Her vision was a little hazy, but once she looked around the room that she was in, her vision cleared. She was lying down on a couch. She looked to her left and saw Middle as well, but she was still asleep. Psst, Middle, wake up, she whispered to her comrade, but Middle wasn't waking up. Calawarna looked behind her and her eyes widened slightly. In the kitchen, she saw Issei. Though he was asleep, she could see that there were around 15 bottles of alcohol on the table. His face was on the table, so she couldn't see it. She looked back at Middle. She gave a tired sigh. She slapped her in the face, successfully waking her up. Ow, Calawarna, what the hell was that faux MPH? Middle began shouting, but she was cut off when Calawarna placed her left hand on her mouth, shutting her up. Shush, Middle, shut up, look over there, Calawarna said, pointing at Issei. Once Middle looked at the direction she was pointing, her eyes widened a bit. It's that darn kid that knocked both of us out, Middle whispered. Yes, I remember, but what happened to Donasik? Calawarna asked with a raised brow. Who cares about him, right now, we should figure a way to get out of here, Middle said. Calawarna nodded in agreement. She looked around the room once more. She noticed that the door wasn't that far from where they were. Middle, we're gonna try and walk over to that door. Make sure that you don't make a single sound, Calawarna said. Okay, but shouldn't we kill him first? I mean, he's asleep, it will be an easy kill for us, Middle said with a smirk on her face. Calawarna looked at Issei for a moment. She then looked away and turned her attention at the door. He's not worth it, come on, let's get out of here, Calawarna said. But why not? Middle asked with a raised brow. Calawarna did not answer immediately, since the reason was also unknown for her. Let's just get out of here, she said again. Middle sighed, dropping the subject for now. A light, fine, but don't expect me to forget about it. But what are we going to do if the door is locked? Middle asked. We'll cross that bridge when we come to it. Now come on, Calawarna said, standing up from the couch. Middle followed. They slowly began to make their way towards the door. Once they reached the door, Calawarna slowly reached out to grab the knob of the door. She slowly turned it. Shit, it's locked, Calawarna said with a frown. Here, let me try something, Middle said, pulling out a small nail. Where did you get that, and when did you learn how to picklock doors? Calawarna asked with a raised brow. Plot convenience, Middle said casually. What? Calawarna asked. Oh, nothing, Middle said quickly. Calawarna looked at Middle weirdly. She then shrugged her shoulders and waited for her to unlock the door. Suddenly, they heard someone clear their throat. They both paled. Slowly and shakily, they both turned around. Issei was now awake. He was staring at them with a sleepy expression. He had dark circles under his eyes, meaning that he was drinking until almost morning. He was also a little pale. His left eye was kinda red, which meant that he was crying at some point. He was also holding a bottle that was filled with beer in his right hand. Issei looked at the two fallen with an emotionless face. He rubbed his eyes and looked at them with a face that said, "Where do you think you two are going?" "Gee, good morning, kid. Did you sleep well?" Calawarna said in a shaky voice. Issei looked at her, but didn't nod nor shake his head. He slowly began to approach the two fallen, which were now backed against the door. Once Issei got close enough, he grabbed the pick from Middle's hand and snapped it in two. He threw it on the ground and continued to stare at the two fallen. Finally, Issei gave a tired sigh and slowly walked away from the two fallen. They both gave a sigh of relief, knowing that he wouldn't do anything right now. Issei went to the couch that the two fallen were sleeping and sat down. He looked down at the bottle in his hand. He put the bottle to his lips and took a big swig. After a few seconds, the beer bottle was now empty. He looked at the bottle for a moment. He let it slip out of his hands, falling to the floor, but not breaking. The two fallen stared at Issei. They didn't know what to do.
What do you want us here? Also, why did you keep us alive? What happened to Ddraig? Middle asked.
Issei broke out of his small drunken state and looked at the two fallen. "The reason as to why we kept the two of you alive is because we want to learn what Kokabiel is planning and where he is. We want you here so you can give us that information. And about your other friend, he had joined Rainier in the afterlife," Ddraig said, surprising the two fallen with his sudden appearance. Once they sank in what Ddraig said, they both looked at each other. "What if we refuse to tell you anything?" Calawarna asked with gritted teeth. "Chuckle, that is an answer that you both already know, but I'll tell you, it's death, of course," Ddraig said with a chuckle. Both Calawarna and Middle flinched at the mention of death. "But, since my partner is in a drunken state, he'll make this as slow and painful as he can, so good luck," Ddraig said. Both the fallen could just feel the grin behind his voice. Once Draig's voice went quiet, Issei stood up. At that point, Middle and Calawarna already had their light spears in hand, but there weren't any smirks on their faces. As Issei took a step forward, they took a step back. Thanks for watching. Part 4 is over. Hope you all enjoyed. If you like, please share this video to your friends.